My wife actually thought she could convince me to let her sleep with her college crush to save our marriage. And her brilliant friends? They backed her up completely, nodding along like this was some groundbreaking relationship therapy they discovered on TikTok. It was a regular Thursday evening when she dropped this bomb on me. I was sitting at the kitchen table, going through some bills, when she walked in with that nervous energy she gets when she's about to say something stupid. Her 3 closest friends had just left after what I thought was their usual wine and gossip session. "We need to talk," she said, sitting across from me with this determined look on her face. I set down my pen and looked at her. After 15 years of marriage, I knew that tone. It meant trouble. "The girls and I were talking," she started, and right there I should have known where this was headed. Nothing good ever comes from sentences that start with "the girls and I." She went on to explain how she'd been feeling disconnected from our marriage lately, how she needed to explore her feelings for someone from her past to truly appreciate what we had. Her college boyfriend had reached out on social media, and apparently, this was the universe giving her a sign. "It's just one night," she said, like she was asking to borrow the car. "It'll help me get closure and come back to you with a renewed perspective on our relationship." I stared at her for a long moment. This woman, the mother of my 2 children, was seriously sitting there asking for permission to cheat on me. And she was trying to frame it as relationship improvement. "The girls think it's a healthy way to address these feelings instead of letting them fester," she continued. "It's better to be honest about it, right?" I leaned back in my chair, processing what I'd just heard. Part of me wanted to laugh at the absurdity. The other part was already calculating my next moves. "So let me get this straight," I said calmly. "You want to spend the night with your ex-boyfriend, and you think this will somehow make our marriage stronger?" "Exactly," she said, relieved that I seemed to understand. "It's about being honest with ourselves and each other." I nodded slowly. "And your friends support this idea?" "They've all been through similar situations. They know what they're talking about." "Right." Her friends. The same group that included 2 women who cheated on their husbands and one who was on her 3rd marriage. Real relationship experts, those 3. "Well," I said, standing up from the table, "if you think one night of freedom will help our marriage, then I guess that sounds fair." Her face lit up. "Really? You understand?" "Oh, I understand completely," I said. "After all, if one night of exploring old feelings is good for you, it should be good for me too, right?" The smile faltered slightly. "What do you mean?" "I mean, if we're being honest about our needs and exploring options to strengthen our marriage, then I should get the same opportunity. Fair is fair." She shifted uncomfortably. "Well, I hadn't really thought about it that way. But you just said it was about honesty and exploring feelings. Surely that applies to both of us." I kept my voice even, reasonable. "Unless you think this arrangement only works one way." She was quiet for a moment, clearly not having thought this through. "I suppose, if that's what you need." "Perfect," I said. "When were you planning this magical night of marriage renewal?" "This Saturday," she said, still looking uncertain about the direction our conversation had taken. "Great. That gives me time to make my own arrangements." I picked up my phone and started scrolling through my contacts. I should probably call a few people, make sure everything's set up properly. "What kind of arrangements?" she asked. "Oh, you know," I said casually. "Just making sure I have everything I need for my night of exploration too." She nodded, though I could see the wheels turning in her head. Something about my calm acceptance was starting to worry her, but her excitement about her upcoming adventure was overriding her instincts. Saturday came quickly. She spent the entire day getting ready, like she was preparing for prom. New dress, hair appointment, the works. She was practically glowing with anticipation. "Are you sure you're okay with this?" she asked one more time as she headed for the door. "Absolutely," I said, kissing her cheek. "Have fun exploring those feelings. I'll be doing some exploring of my own." She left with a spring in her step, probably thinking she'd married the most understanding husband in the world. The moment her car disappeared down the street, I made my first phone call. "Hi, this is about the consultation we discussed." "Yes, I'm ready to move forward with the paperwork. Tonight works perfectly." Then I made the second call. "Mom, it's me. I need you and Dad to come over tonight. Bring the kids' overnight bags from last weekend. We're going to need to have a serious family meeting." By the time I made my third call, I was already feeling better about the situation. "This is regarding the documentation we discussed." "Yes, I have everything ready. The meeting is set for 11 p.m. My wife thought she was so clever, getting permission to destroy our marriage while making me complicit in it. What she didn't realize was that she just handed me everything I needed to end this on my terms. The house was going to be very different when she got back from her night of marriage improvement. And for the first time in months, I was actually looking forward to seeing the look on her face. While she was off playing out her college fantasies, I was busy orchestrating the most important evening of our marriage, the evening that would end it. Her parents arrived first, around 8:30. I could see the concern on their faces when I opened the door. "What's this about?" her mother asked immediately. "You sounded urgent on the phone." "Come in and sit down," I said. "We need to talk about your daughter's recent decisions." Her father, a no-nonsense man who'd never particularly liked the way she treated me, settled into his usual chair. "Where is she, anyway?" "That's part of what we need to discuss," I said. "She's currently spending the night with her ex-boyfriend from college." With my full knowledge and consent, the silence that followed was deafening. Her mother's face went pale. "She's what?" her father said, his voice dangerously quiet. I explained the entire conversation, word for word, how she'd framed it as marriage therapy, how her friends had encouraged this brilliant plan, how she'd asked for my permission like she was requesting a weekend getaway. "And you said yes?" her mother asked, confused. I said yes because I wanted her to have exactly what she was asking for, I said. Complete honesty about our marriage. At 9:15, my brother arrived with the kids. He'd picked them up from their sleepover as I'd requested, telling them we were having a family gathering. "Dad, why are Grandma and Grandpa here so late?" my 12-year-old daughter asked. "We're going to have an important family meeting when your mom gets home," I said. "Until then, you can watch TV in the living room." My son, who was 14 and sharper than most adults, looked around the room and seemed to sense something serious was happening. At 10 o'clock, the attorneys arrived. Two of them, both specialists in family law that I'd consulted with earlier in the week. They'd been remarkably efficient in preparing the preliminary paperwork. "Everything is ready," the lead attorney told me quietly. "The separation agreement, custody arrangements, division of assets. We've included the evidence you provided about her statements regarding this arrangement." "Evidence?" her father asked. I pulled out my phone and played the recording I'd made of our Thursday night conversation. In our state, recording conversations in your own home was perfectly legal, especially when it involved potential marital misconduct. Her voice came through clearly. "It's just one night. It'll help me get closure and come back to you with a renewed perspective on our relationship." Her mother actually gasped. Her father's jaw tightened. "You recorded her asking permission to cheat on you," her mother whispered. "I recorded her asking permission to engage in extramarital relations for the stated purpose of improving our marriage," I corrected. "The recording will show that this was a premeditated decision on her part, not a moment of weakness or a mistake." The attorneys nodded approvingly. "It significantly strengthens your position regarding fault-based divorce proceedings," one of them explained, "particularly regarding spousal support and asset division." By 10:30, everything was in place. Her parents sat on one side of the living room, still processing what their daughter had done. The kids were in their pajamas, sensing the gravity of the situation even if they didn't fully understand it yet. The attorneys had their papers ready in neat folders on the coffee table. At 11:15, I heard her car in the driveway. "Places, everyone," I said with dark humor that wasn't lost on her father, who actually cracked a small smile despite the circumstances. The front door opened, and I heard her heels clicking across the hardwood floor. She was humming something under her breath, probably still riding the high of her therapeutic evening. "Honey, I'm back," she called out in a sing-song voice. "You won't believe how much clarity I have about our relationship now." She walked into the living room, expecting to find me waiting anxiously for her return, ready to hear about her renewed appreciation for our marriage. Instead, she stopped dead in her tracks. Her parents sat stiffly on the couch. The kids looked up from their phones with confused expressions. Two men in suits sat at the dining room table with briefcases open, and I stood in the center of it all, arms crossed, with an expression she'd never seen before. What's going on?" she asked, her voice already losing its confident edge. "Family meeting," I said simply, "just like you suggested we needed. Complete honesty about our marriage." Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the scene. "Who are these men?" "Those are divorce attorneys," I said calmly. "We're going to discuss the dissolution of our marriage. Starting right now." The color drained from her face. "What are you talking about? I just went out for one night, like we agreed." "Yes, you did exactly what you asked permission to do," I said. "And now I'm doing exactly what I need to do. I told you fair was fair, didn't I?" Her mother was crying quietly. Her father wouldn't even look at her. The kids were starting to understand that something major was happening to our family. But this was supposed to help our marriage, she stammered. And it did, I said. It helped me realize exactly what kind of marriage we really had. The trap had been perfectly set, and she'd walked right into it, just like I knew she would. She stood there in her expensive new dress, makeup still perfect from her evening out, trying to process what was happening. The contrast between her appearance and the reality of the situation was almost poetic. "You can't be serious," she said, looking around the room desperately. "Mom, Dad, tell him this is crazy." Her mother finally looked up, tears still streaming down her face. "We heard the recording, sweetheart." "What recording?" I held up my phone. "The one where you asked permission to cheat on your husband for the sake of marriage therapy. Would you like me to play it again for everyone?" "That's not. I mean, it wasn't like that," she said, but her voice was already losing conviction. Her father finally spoke, his voice cold as ice. "Explain to me how it wasn't like that. Because from where I'm sitting, my daughter just spent the night with another man while her husband and children were at home. It was supposed to bring us closer together," she said, her voice getting higher. "The girls said it would help me appreciate what I had." "The girls," her father repeated with disgust. "You mean your divorced friends who convinced you to destroy your marriage?" One of the attorneys cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should begin with the formal discussion. Mrs. Johnson, I'm Robert Chin from the law firm of Chun and Associates. This is my colleague, Patricia Williams. We're here to facilitate the dissolution of your marriage." She stared at them like they were speaking a foreign language. "Dissolution? No. This is all a misunderstanding. We can work this out." "Actually, we can't," I said, maintaining the same calm tone I'd used all week. "You asked for honesty in our marriage. This is me being completely honest. I'm done. But you said you understood. You said it was fair." "I did say that," I agreed. "And I meant it. It was fair for you to show me exactly who you really are. And it's fair for me to respond accordingly." The lead attorney opened his folder. "We've prepared a comprehensive separation agreement. Given the circumstances surrounding the breakdown of the marriage, the terms are quite favorable to your husband." "Favorable how?" she asked, though she seemed afraid to hear the answer. "Primary custody of the children, retention of the family home, and limited spousal support due to the adultery clause in your prenuptial agreement," the attorney explained matter-of-factly. Her face went white. "The prenup? But that was just to protect us from debt." "Among other things, yes," I said, "including infidelity clauses. You might remember signing it, though you probably didn't read it very carefully. You were so eager to get married back then." My daughter spoke up from the couch, her voice small and confused. "Mom, did you really spend the night with another man?" The question hung in the air like a blade. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Not my anger, not her parents' disappointment, but the innocent confusion of our children finally understanding what their mother had done. "Sweetie, it's complicated," she said, moving toward the kids. "No, it's really not," my son said, his voice harder than I'd ever heard it. "It's actually pretty simple. You cheated on Dad. I had permission. From Dad, maybe," my daughter said quietly. "But did you ask us if it was okay for you to hurt our family?" That question broke something in her. She started crying, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of someone realizing they'd miscalculated badly. "This isn't how this was supposed to go," she said through her sobs. "I was supposed to come home with a new appreciation for our marriage. We were supposed to be stronger." "Based on what?" I asked. "Based on you sleeping with another man? What exactly did you think would happen when you got home? That I'd be sitting here grateful that you cheated on me with my blessing?" Her mother stood up abruptly. "I need some air," she said, and walked out onto the back porch. Her father followed, shaking his head. That left just us, the kids, and the attorneys in the living room. "The papers are ready for your signature," Patricia Williams said gently. "We can go through them now, or you can take time to review them with your own legal counsel." "My own counsel?" she said blankly. "You'll need your own attorney," I explained. "These lawyers represent me. You can't use the same ones in a divorce." "But I don't have money for attorneys." "That's addressed in Section 12 of the separation agreement," Mr. Chin said. "A limited fund has been allocated for your legal representation, drawn from the joint account." She looked at the papers like they were written in hieroglyphics. "I don't understand any of this. How did you have time to prepare all this?" "I've been preparing since Thursday," I said simply. "Right after our conversation." "Thursday? But you seemed fine with it." "I was fine with it. I was fine with you showing me who you really are so I could respond appropriately. My son looked at me with something that might have been respect. Dad, are we really getting divorced? Yes, I said. Your mother made a choice that ended our marriage. Now we're dealing with the consequences of that choice. But I can fix this, she said desperately. I can make this right. How? I asked. Are you going to unsleep with your ex-boyfriend? Are you going to unask permission to cheat on your husband? Are you going to unhumiliate your family? She had no answer for that. The attorneys began laying out the papers on the coffee table, each document representing the end of 15 years of marriage. She watched them with growing panic, finally understanding that this wasn't a negotiation or a dramatic gesture. This was really happening, and there was absolutely nothing she could do to stop it. The next hour was a masterclass in consequences. She sat at the dining table, surrounded by legal documents that spelled out the end of her comfortable life, while I explained exactly how her marriage therapy was going to work out for her. Let's start with custody, I said, sliding the first set of papers across to her. The children will live with me primarily. You'll have supervised visitation every other weekend, pending a psychological evaluation. Supervised? She gasped. I'm their mother. You're also someone who just demonstrated remarkably poor judgment regarding family stability, Patricia Williams said professionally. The court will want to ensure the children's emotional well-being during this transition. My daughter spoke up from the couch. Do we get a say in this? At your ages, yes, Mr. Chen explained. The court will consider your preferences heavily. Both kids looked at their mother, then at me. The decision was written all over their faces. I want to stay with Dad, my daughter said quietly. This is too confusing. My son nodded. Same. At least Dad doesn't make crazy decisions and then act surprised when they backfire. She looked like she'd been physically slapped. You don't understand. I was trying to save our family. By sleeping with another man, my son asked with teenage bluntness. Mom, that's not how saving families works. That's literally how you destroy them. I moved on to the next document. The house stays with me and the children. You'll need to find your own place. Where am I supposed to go? I suggest asking your college boyfriend, I said without a trace of humor, since he was so important to your personal growth. Her parents came back inside, her father looking like he'd aged 10 years in one evening. Have you signed anything yet? He asked her. I'm not signing anything, she said, suddenly finding some fight. This is insane. You can't just end our marriage because I made one mistake. One mistake. I repeated, let me walk you through your mistakes. First, you decided our marriage needed improvement through adultery. Second, you enlisted your friends to validate this lunacy. Third, you asked your husband's permission to cheat on him. Fourth, you actually went through with it. And fifth, you came home expecting gratitude for betraying your family. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet neighborhood where we'd raised our children. But the biggest mistake was thinking I'd sit here and take it. Her mother finally found her voice. Maybe we should all take a step back. Think about this rationally. I've been thinking rationally all week, I said. While she was planning her romantic evening, I was planning our divorce. Rational thinking is why these papers are so thorough. The attorney pulled out another folder. We should also discuss the financial arrangements. Given the prenuptial agreement and the circumstances of the marriage's end, spousal support will be minimal. How minimal? She asked, though she clearly didn't want to hear the answer. 6 months of temporary support while you establish independent living arrangements and find employment. Mr. Chen read from the document. After that, nothing. Nothing? I haven't worked in 8 years. That was your choice, I said. Just like tonight was your choice. Her father sat down heavily in his chair. What about your job history? Your degree? I have a marketing degree I haven't used since 2016, she said miserably. Who's going to hire me now? That's not my problem anymore, I said simply. You wanted freedom to explore your options. Now you have complete freedom. She turned to her parents desperately. Can I stay with you while I figure this out? The silence from her parents was deafening. Finally, her father spoke. Your mother and I need to discuss this. What you did tonight. It's not just about your marriage anymore. It's about who you are as a person. Dad, don't dad me, he said sharply. I raised you better than this. We both did. And now you're sitting here acting like you're the victim in a situation you created entirely by yourself. The kids had been listening to everything, and I could see them processing not just their parents' divorce, but their mother's character in a whole new light. The papers also include a morality clause, Patricia Williams continued. Any future relationships you enter into cannot be around the children without court approval. You're treating me like I'm dangerous. You made a decision that destabilized your children's home, I said. That makes you a risk to their emotional well-being. She looked around the room frantically, as if searching for someone who would tell her this was all just a bad dream. What about counseling? What about working things out? You had 15 years to work things out, I said. Instead, you chose to work things out with your ex-boyfriend. One night. It was one night. One night that ended our marriage. I corrected. One night that showed me everything I needed to know about your priorities and your character. She started crying again, but this time it was different. These weren't tears of frustration or confusion. These were tears of someone finally understanding that actions have permanent consequences. I can't lose everything, she whispered. You should have thought of that before you risked everything, my son said, his voice carrying a maturity that broke my heart a little. You gambled with our family and lost. The attorneys finished laying out all the documents. Custody arrangements, property division, debt allocation, support schedules. 15 years of marriage reduced to a stack of legal papers. These can be filed as early as Monday morning, Mr. Chen said. The preliminary injunctions will take effect immediately, including the custody arrangements and property restrictions. She stared at the papers like they were her own death warrant, because in a way they were. The next 3 weeks moved with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine. While she scrambled to find an attorney and figure out where she was going to live, I focused on maintaining stability for the kids and following through on every legal detail. Her parents had decided she couldn't stay with them. Her father had been brutally clear about it during a phone call I overheard. You made your bed, literally, he told her. Now you need to figure out how to lie in it without dragging the rest of us down with you. She'd ended up in a studio apartment across town, paid for with the temporary support funds. It was a far cry from our 4-bedroom house in the suburbs, but it was what her choices had earned her. The kids visited her that first weekend and came back early. It's weird there, my daughter told me. She keeps crying and asking us to forgive her, but then she gets mad when we don't want to talk about it. She showed us pictures of the apartment and kept saying how this was temporary, my son added. Like she thinks you're going to change your mind. I wasn't changing my mind. If anything, her behavior during the divorce proceedings had confirmed that I'd made the right decision. She tried every manipulation tactic in the book, crying phone calls about how sorry she was, angry voicemails about how I was being vindictive, attempts to turn the kids against me by painting herself as the victim of my overreaction. None of it worked. Her attorney, a tired-looking man who clearly wished he'd never taken this case, had tried to negotiate better terms. He'd requested joint custody, half the house's value, extended spousal support, and shared assets. My attorneys had responded with a counteroffer that was somehow even less favorable to her than the original papers. Your client committed adultery with documented premeditation, Mr. Chun had explained to her lawyer during one tense meeting. She has no leverage in these negotiations. The most satisfying moment came when she tried to claim that her night out wasn't actually adultery because I'd given permission. So you're arguing that your client asked her husband's permission to commit adultery? Patricia Williams had asked with barely concealed amusement, and that this somehow makes it better? Her lawyer had actually rubbed his temples during that exchange. Meanwhile, her college boyfriend had apparently lost interest quickly once he realized he'd helped destroy a marriage. According to mutual friends, he'd blocked her on social media and told people she was too much drama for him. The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd thrown away 15 years of marriage for a man who'd ghosted her within a week. Her friends, the ones who'd encouraged this brilliant plan, had also mysteriously disappeared from her life. Apparently, being around someone whose marriage had imploded due to their advice made them uncomfortable. By the third week, she was calling me directly, bypassing the attorneys entirely. Please, she said during one particularly pathetic phone call. Can we just talk about this? Just the two of us. We are talking, I said, through our attorneys. That's how divorces work. But we have history together. We have children together. We had history, I corrected. You ended that history when you decided to make some new history with your ex-boyfriend. It didn't mean anything. It meant everything. I said simply. It meant our marriage meant so little to you that you were willing to risk it for one night with another man. The court date arrived on a rainy Thursday morning. She showed up looking defeated, her attorney carrying a briefcase that probably contained her agreement to nearly every term we'd proposed. The judge, an older woman who'd clearly seen every variation of human stupidity in family court, reviewed the case file with barely concealed disdain. "Let me understand this correctly," Judge Martinez said, looking at her over her reading glasses. "You requested permission from your husband to engage in extramarital relations for the stated purpose of improving your marriage." "Your Honor, it's more complicated than that," her attorney began. "Is it?" the judge interrupted. "Because the recorded conversation seems fairly straightforward. The defendant clearly articulated her intention to commit adultery as a form of marriage therapy. Even her own lawyer looked embarrassed. The judge approved every aspect of our settlement. Custody, property division, support terms, everything. The whole hearing took less than 30 minutes. As we left the courthouse, she made one final attempt. "The kids need their mother," she said, walking beside me toward the parking garage. "The kids need stability," I replied. "They need a parent who makes decisions based on what's best for the family, not what feels good in the moment." I made a mistake. I stopped walking and turned to face her. "You made a choice. You chose your college boyfriend over your family. You chose your friend's advice over your marriage. You chose temporary excitement over permanent stability. And you chose to destroy everything instead of fighting for us. I chose to have self-respect," I said. "Something you might want to look into." She stood there in the rain, holding divorce papers that officially ended our marriage, finally understanding that some choices can't be undone. I got in my car and drove home to my children, who were waiting for me to help them with their homework and make dinner. Normal family activities with what was left of our family. As I pulled into the driveway of the house that was now entirely mine, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, life had settled into a rhythm that actually worked. The kids and I had developed routines that didn't revolve around walking on eggshells or managing someone else's emotional chaos. My daughter had made honor roll that semester. My son had joined the debate team and was thriving in an environment where logic and clear thinking were valued. Both of them seemed lighter somehow, like they'd been carrying a weight they didn't even realize was there. Their mother's supervised visits had become increasingly sporadic. She'd moved twice already, each apartment smaller and seedier than the last. Her temporary support had ended as scheduled, and her attempts to find work that matched her previous lifestyle had been unsuccessful. The marketing degree she'd abandoned 8 years ago wasn't opening the doors she'd expected in today's job market. She'd taken a part-time position at a retail store in the mall, which barely covered her rent, let alone the lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to during our marriage. Her parents had maintained minimal contact with her. Her father had made it clear that while they still loved her, they couldn't respect the choices she'd made. Her mother occasionally sent care packages, but even those had become less frequent. During one of our last phone conversations, her mother had confided in me. "I keep thinking about how different this could have been," she'd said sadly, "if she'd just talked to you about whatever she was feeling instead of this." The kids had stopped asking when she was coming for visits. They'd adapted to the peace of our new normal and didn't seem eager to disrupt it with drama. Last week, my daughter had asked if we could redecorate the living room. "It still feels like Mom's space," she'd explained. "I want it to feel like ours." We'd spent the weekend painting walls and rearranging furniture. It was the first time in years that our house felt like a home instead of a battlefield waiting to happen. My son had been the most direct about the whole situation, as teenage boys often are. "I don't miss the fighting," he'd told me while we were assembling new furniture. "I didn't realize how much energy it took to deal with Mom's moods until we didn't have to anymore." The irony of her situation wasn't lost on anyone who knew the story. She'd wanted one night of freedom to appreciate her marriage, and had ended up with complete freedom and no marriage to appreciate. Her college boyfriend had moved on entirely, apparently dating someone closer to his own age who didn't come with divorce baggage and emotional instability. According to the social media updates my kids sometimes showed me, he looked pretty happy. Her friend group had imploded as well. 2 of the women who'd encouraged her brilliant plan were dealing with their own relationship consequences, and the third had apparently decided that being associated with someone who destroyed her family for a one-night stand wasn't good for her own image. I'd run into one of them at the grocery store a few weeks ago. She'd tried to make small talk, but when I'd mentioned how well the kids were doing, she'd gotten uncomfortable and made excuses to leave. People in our neighborhood had been surprisingly supportive. Most of them had witnessed years of her dramatic outbursts and manipulation tactics, and several neighbors had privately told me they weren't surprised by how things had ended. We always wondered how you put up with it, one had said. You seemed like you were always managing a crisis that she'd created. The house was quieter now, but it was a good quiet. The kind of quiet that comes from stability rather than people walking on eggshells. My daughter had friends over regularly now, something that had rarely happened before because her mother's unpredictable moods had made our home an uncomfortable place for other kids. My son had started bringing his girlfriend around, a smart, grounded teenager who reminded me of what healthy relationships looked like. Your dad is so calm, I'd overheard her tell him once. My parents are always fighting about something. He wasn't always this relaxed, my son had replied. Divorce was actually good for him. That conversation had stuck with me because it was true. I was better as a single father than I'd been as a married man, constantly managing someone else's poor decisions and emotional volatility. The financial situation had stabilized as well. Without her spending habits and dramatic gestures, our household budget actually worked. The kids could participate in activities without me worrying about whether she decided to spend money on another essential purchase or weekend getaway with her friends. Last month, she'd made one final attempt at reconciliation. She'd shown up at the house unannounced, looking desperate and defeated. I've learned so much about myself, she'd said through the screen door. I know what I did wrong now. I know how to be a better wife. I'm sure you do, I'd replied calmly. You should use that knowledge in your next relationship. There won't be a next relationship. I want my family back. You gave up your family for one night with another man, I'd reminded her. That was your choice. Live with it. She'd left crying, but I'd felt nothing but relief that the locks had been changed and she no longer had keys. The kids hadn't even asked why she'd been there. They'd seen her through the window and had simply continued with their homework as if nothing had happened. That night, as I was tucking my daughter into bed, she looked up at me with serious eyes. Dad, are you happy now? I'm peaceful, I told her. Sometimes that's better than happy. She'd nodded like she understood exactly what I meant. 6 months later, I could honestly say that her night of marriage therapy had been the best thing that ever happened to our family. It had removed the source of constant chaos and given the rest of us a chance to build something stable and healthy. She'd wanted one night to appreciate what she had. Instead, she'd taught us all to appreciate what we had without her. The lesson was complete, the consequences permanent, and the results exactly what she'd earned. Sometimes the best marriages are the ones that end.